Hey everyone, I'm Zandie. I'm your moderator tonight. I'm really thrilled to be here. It's kind of a converging of small worlds of that have overlapped in my decade plus after having graduated from Duke. Um, I just wanted to take a moment to kind of recognize, well, to thank all of you guys for being here tonight. I know we're all in this kind of awkward moment of working and studying and learning from home, learning how to learn from home, which is an awkward time, especially with all of the compounding crises that our nation is facing, from the pandemic to this long coming moment of racial reconciliation that our nation's going through. So it's really cool to see you guys out here and participating. I think part of the reason we're here is because we really, all of us that did go to Duke, found our ways into the creative space, working as artists, as producers, as curators. I think that we all wish that there could have been moments, platforms, and tools that were available like this to us. So I think it's cool that you guys are all here. Um, Before I introduce myself, just wanted to say thank you all for joining us and for kicking off season 2 of DukeCreate DEMAN Live. I'm joined tonight by some fellow Duke alumni, Chris Shaw and Cody Grammer, who are creative partners and who I've had the pleasure of collaborating with to make a few Beats by Dre commercials in Asia. And just FYI, they were both very good friends back in the day at Duke. We spent many nights together at Divine's and all of Durham's finest watering holes. So just a little note to feed the friendships that really nourish you and that inspire you, because you have no idea where they're going to take you, and what they might blossom into in the future. We're also very lucky to be joined by Mike, who's the head of global content production at Beats. So welcome. Also, Mike, first time that I get to meet you, so I'm really thrilled to be sharing the stage with you and to hear about all of your experience that has at Beats and that's brought you here. So we're excited to be talking to you guys about just like the overall process of creating commercials and with global teams and talent and working in this tricky age of Zoom land. So just a few quick announcements. Quick shout out to all the amazing student groups that we got to meet just before this in the Green Room, Small Town Records, Duke Sports Management, Student Broadcasting, Free Rider Presentations, the Indie Film Festival, the Standard, Form Magazine, Business Oriented Women. Wow, bow. That still exists. Amazing, beautiful. And the Duke Marketing Club. Thank you for joining us. Also, just want to let you guys know we're going to be recording this conversation for the DEMAN Live website, so be sure to check the link. We're going to be taking live questions towards the end, so send Kevin your questions. He's the director of DukeCreate. Both Amy and Kevin will be following up with an email with both mine and Chris' email. So if you guys have any questions or want advice or just want to talk about the industry, feel free to reach out to us. We're here. We're really happy to be supportive in whatever way we can. And last but not least, a very, very big thank you to both Amy and Kevin for all that you guys are doing to bring this amazing programming to Duke. I was actually just formerly running all of the public programs in education at the Annenberg Space for Photography. And public programming takes a lot of work. Moving them online takes a lot of logistics and a lot of air traffic controlling of emails. So really appreciate all the work that you're doing behind the scenes, and thank you for bringing us here today. So I'm going to start with some quick intros before we get into the bulk of the conversation. Quickly, I'm a curator and have been a curator, but also creative strategist, currently in LA, where I'm from. But before I got here, there was a long road that that I took from my days at Duke, where I was for both an undergrad studying sociology, also did a minor in photography, and the MMS certificate, ended up doing the Masters of Management Studies at Fuqua, which seems like a departure from my work in the creative field, but actually was a really interesting foundation for working on the administrative side of the arts. But from there, I actually ended up spending the better part of a decade in China, kind of between Beijing and Shanghai, where I was the founder of a cross-disciplinary cultural lab called Bhaktagon Projects. We did a lot of exhibitions, podcasts before that was a thing, and we also published a visual literary journal called Bajia. As I said, upon moving back to LA, I was running public programs and education at the Annenberg Space for Photography, but also got the opportunity to work on some really amazing campaigns together with Chris and other clients, from Beats to Champion and Louis Vuitton, and Swire Hotels in Asia. So yeah, kind of, doing a lot of things, and we'll talk about that hybrid slasher culture of being a creative. But before we move forward into that, I wanted to give a moment to Michael and Chris and Cody to introduce yourselves. So why don't you guys tell us what you're doing now, and kind of how you got your start in the industry, but also maybe talk a little bit about what you studied in school, and maybe it aligns, maybe it's a radical departure. So go ahead. Maybe Michael, you want to start it off?
Hey everybody, Michael Refuerzo. I'm currently head of content production for Beats by Dre. That ranges overseeing production from everything from global TV campaigns to photography to digital social content, short, long format films, music videos. Prior to Beats, I oversaw content and was executive producer for a place called Media Arts Lab, where we produced work and all the visuals for Apple. And kind of when Apple purchased Beats by Dre, I kind of went over to Beats as part of that transition as they started to integrate the two companies. But yeah, I've been at Beats for about 4 years now. Long time ago when I was a student, I went to Cal State Fullerton in California, just outside of Los Angeles. I studied film and TV. I also studied photography. And as I was in school studying film, it's one of those areas that could be very general, whether it's you want to be a director, a producer, an editor, visual effects, animation, writer. You could be a lot of different things. And I think you start to discover and explore what that is. And as I was graduating, I kind of was trying to identify what I didn't want to do. So I would do a number of internships and I would meet different people, and somehow, some way, I met people in advertising. And just as Zandie, just as you said, through friends in college, that goes a long way. My friends happened to be advertising majors, and they went on to work at ad agencies, and they started to share that there was a production creative side to the world of advertising. And that was really interesting to me because I started to discover that the different directors that I would follow and admire, that they not only were they doing films, but they were doing music videos and the commercials on TV that we were all watching. They were doing all that work as well. So the directors that we knew as just doing movies were doing content basically for all different formats and mediums. And so I got into advertising, and somehow, some way, I ended up working on Apple early on. And I think that was a testament to me having somewhat of a production background, but also um, being young, and I was always surrounded by artists and people that were contributing to culture, whether it was music or fashion or design, and just being surrounded by that world and having a background in production was an intersection that was intriguing to people that were working on Apple, and being young as well. And so as Apple was transitioning from a computer company into a music company, I was kind of, I guess you could say, kind of at the right place at the right time. And there was about 10 of us that was doing all that work. And that's when we launched iTunes, iMovie, iPhoto, and then eventually went to launch the iPod. And we created and I produced, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the original iPod campaign, which is the silhouettes, the dancing silhouettes. So I produced that work, and then Apple just started to blossom and grow, and then we launched the iPhone, and then it's become the brand that we all are aware of today. Uh, but that's kind of like my journey in a 2 minute summary.
Cool. That's great. No, we're going to definitely unpack that more. But we're going to move from you, Michael, who actually this is kind of interesting for you guys to know, who's at the brand. And now we're going to move to the agency. So, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Chris, founder, executive producer of GBA Studios. I graduated from Duke in 2008. Shortly thereafter, I'm from North Carolina, but I moved to LA after graduation. Started my career in the music space. I worked at a small music house doing music for commercials and for films, scoring and music supervising, which was really fun. Then I bounced to a independent music label and worked there for a little while. And then actually I met Mike Refuerzo, and he hired me at Media Arts Lab, and that was my first sort of training and glimpse into the media production space, content production space. So I was there for 3 years, also producing some of the early Apple work, the iPhone 4 campaign, the first iPad campaign, working underneath Mike. And then after that, I went kind of back to the music space and ran the company where I first interned, and then started GBA in 2017 that kind of brought all of these different music and content interests together. And now we work with brands like Beats and Champion and put out content, and we also put out music as well.
Cool. Great. Thank you. And now we're going to move to the creative. So there's the brand, the agency, and then the creative that worked on some campaigns together. So Cody, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Andy. Cody Grammer. I'm class of '08. I graduated with Chris a year ahead of Zandie. From the Outer Banks of North Carolina, a small town called Newport. And after graduating, I went to law school in Denver. And shortly thereafter, I'd been visiting Chris several times in California, so I migrated on over, completed the journey west, and I've been living in LA since then, 2011. I practiced law for 7 years, and then last year really is when I started going to writing full time. I guess how I got onto the project, I should say I was an English major and a philosophy minor, and I guess the quick little story, I guess Chris and I met like one of the first weeks at Duke, and we've nourished this writing relationship since then. The first night we met, I think I passed out in the chair in my room, and I woke up and Chris was in my bed asleep. And then I look at my computer, and it's just a poem written by Chris, and it says Chris Shaw Late Night Freestyle, and it was just like this this like pretty awesome poem. And so was born a poetic friendship. You know, we've exchanged a lot of writings over the years, and Chris has been instrumental in you know, encouraging me and giving me the confidence to step out on my own with writing. And with this particular project, Chris was just catching up. I don't know if you told him that you were in Tokyo. Chris is in Tokyo now. He was in LA. We were roommates out here for a while, but so we catch up a lot on WhatsApp, and he's telling me about this amazing project with Kanoa Igarashi. Growing up in the Outer Banks, like I've always surfed. I surf out here and everything. So he's telling me about Kanoa, and of course I know about him, and I'm like, man, this is so cool. And he's telling me about like everything that Beat's doing, the whole idea for the campaign and everything. I mean, nothing that was confidential, of course, but he told me some rough parameters, and I was like, man, this sounds amazing. Like, and I did something that I've never done before with my writing, at least, is like I put myself out there. And I was just like, you gotta let me try to write on this. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe. And we kept it moving. And then the next day he hit me up and he's like, you wanna give it a try? And I was like, absolutely. And I just like went after it. I wrote probably like 5 or 6 pieces. Chris really helped me pare it down to one good one. And then I guess you guys can talk about what happened after that, but Chris, I guess, presented it to Mike, and you guys were for it, and so we ran with it, and that led since then to I guess we've done 4 total projects together where I was the writer on it. And so in conclusion, I really appreciate you guys letting me be here and talk to you guys, and if there's anything I can do to help, hopefully my contact information is somewhere, and just let me know.
Awesome. So we're gonna all deconstruct all of your paths in a little bit. But we're really here tonight to kind of talk about the creative process behind creating commercials or visual or spots, but really kind of this process of creating visual stories and telling visual stories. So from ideation through to production, through to release on brand platforms. So we're going to start macro and work our way down to the micro. But before we kind of get into the project that we're going to use as a case study tonight, I wanted to maybe start with asking Mike a little bit about what it means to be generating campaigns for a global market. And more specifically, can you tell us a little bit about how you go about identifying key topics that present or represent brand's identity across different regions, and then also selecting talent to feature?
As far as creating content for different regions, I mean, I think for us as a brand, I think you guys are all very aware of, I'm hoping you guys are aware of who and what Beats is and what we stand for. I think we have a pretty strong brand identity. We have a strong belief system. And what we try to do is, whether it's creating content for different countries in Europe or in Asia, is first and foremost, we want to stay true, authentic, and honest to whatever market that we're creating for. And I think we want to be as honest, because what may be right marketing and strategy wise for America doesn't necessarily make sense for Japan, China, or Germany. And so we want to be really respectful to that audience and make sure that that we are aware of what is intriguing to them and what's meaningful to them. And I think by doing that I think ideas are ideas, and once we're aware of them, but it's who we partner with. So we want to partner with whether it's talent that's authentic to that market, but definitely our creative partners, whether it's a director or a photographer, that can give us some of those cultural insights. And through that is the collaboration of how we come and tell these authentic stories. As far as talent, I think for us is, yes, we do go for, in some cases we go for people that are top of their category, but it's really it may seem that way, but what we're really going for are athletes and artists that stand for something. And even if they are the underdog, and you'll see that, like, yes, we're going to sponsor a NASCAR driver, and he might be the best, or she might be the best NASCAR driver, but they also have a voice and they stand for something. And we're doing that with Bubba Wallace right now. And we're going to support him not just as a driver, but also as an activist, and help use our platform for his voice to be heard. And I think we're always looking for that kind of bi-directional support. Yes, we can support them, but use us to support themselves as well.
Cool. Maybe you can segue into the Kanoa piece, kind of how that came about, and kind of on your end. And then Chris, I'm going to let you play the spot and then talk a little bit about the genesis of it and kind of the ideation behind that from the agency end as well.
I mean, Kanoa, we're just really looking for stories, one that matter to the market, but stories that matter to us as a brand, like I said. And Kanoa, I don't know if you guys are aware of him, he's a Japanese-American surfer. And there's a lot of intersections and a lot of, as he prepares in his training, his story of growing up. I think his parents are surfers, right, Chris?
Dad was a former surfer, yeah.
Yeah, and really, like I said, it's really just, we're really always finding the intersection of who's great, but who has a beautiful story. And really that is the genesis of how we curate the talent. And, you know, because somebody might be great, but they're not really saying anything, or it's hard for us to storytell around them. And what we don't want to do is just sponsor an athlete just to sponsor an athlete. We really are looking to tell stories. And if you look at our body of work, you'll see that's kind of our mission, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that storytelling component is really key. So, Chris, why don't you show us the piece, and then we can talk a little bit about what it means to kind of figure out what Kanoa's story is, how we went about excavating it, and then telling it as in the spot.
Cool. You guys see that okay?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
We're frozen, Chris.
Yeah, it's frozen for me.
Frozen, but it's a beautiful frame.
Are you guys on at least the wide? Let's try this. Is better?
Yeah.
Still choppy.
覚えているか？君が生まれるはるか前に夢であったんだ。そして一緒に海で泳いだ。息子よ、覚えているか？とても大きな波が来たんだ。水面は一瞬にして無秩序になり、海の深いところで静寂を見つけた。静寂、海の乱れが去るのを待った。空気を求めて水面へ上がってきたとき、君は優しく微笑んだ。そしてそろそろ起きる時間だよと言ったんだ。それでもお前は起きたくないと言った。気づくと俺は起きていて、君はもういなかった。ただ一つ言えることは、俺は今でも覚えている。心の中で、たくさんの犠牲の中で、夢の中で。そして君も覚えているはずだ。
Were you guys able to watch that okay?
Yeah, that was great.
I think everyone has the link too. They can watch it on their own. But yeah, just to dive in a little bit more about the making of that spot. To echo Mike's point, I think Beats is really, they're really deliberate with the talent they choose. So a lot of times when we're developing creative, it's identifying who the talent is and what their story is. And whenever we do that, we want to keep it as authentic as possible. We're not recreating anything that's not authentic to the talent. And in this scenario, we identified 3 Japanese athletes, and the premise was let's find 3 to 4 athletes that are sort of next generation for Japan, representing a new style for Japan and a new generation for Japan. Obviously, in lead up to Tokyo 2020, they were all Olympic hopefuls. And so I think Kanoa's was particularly strong because he has such a compelling story. So we work really closely with Mike, and Beats is actually a really great brand because they have an internal, a very strong internal creative department. And Mike has done a good job leading that. So it really starts with open communication at an early stage with Mike and his team on the production standpoint, the brands team and the creative team. And so from there, we kind of had a brief. I can actually, the brief was basically to how do you tell an athlete story in a different way. We didn't want to create just like a sort of normal, you see a lot of sports commercials that kind of have the same themes, same tropes. So that was the ask. And
Chris,
we,
sorry to interrupt, why don't you share the brief so students can read it, and see what is the kind of, yeah, brief that a brand would deliver to an agency.
and so this is just one, obviously there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. We'll have strategy slides, but this is just one sort of piece of what would go into a brief. This is the creative thinking behind the. So that was sort of the ask to do this in a way that was unexpected, and create something that's more conceptual and artistic. And so we really wanted to go into more of the art film conceptual headspace of these athletes, and really get into who they are as people, and not just what makes them great, but also what the challenges that they go through mentally. So with each of them, and with Kanoa in particular, we did a really deep dive into who he was as a person, and we had a lot of conversation with him.
Yeah, and Chris, I think that is an important part, and that, and I want to emphasize that, because what Zandie had said up front, and the reason why Chris, Cody, Zandie, and I'm here, we're all interconnected, is because of those relationships. And us and our athletes, we create true relationships with them. You'd be surprised that some of even the bigger athletes that we have on our roster, and they're signed to Nike and Adidas, but they don't have the same relationship with some of those brands as we do with them. And it's because we develop a real relationship, we have real conversations, and through those conversations, we gather insights. And those insights you can only get from having a real conversation. It's not an interview, it's not transactional. For them to give us this amount of time and out of their training while they're preparing for the Olympics, I think it reflects the type of relationships that we have with them. But I think what Chris and Cody were able to do to pull out of those conversations, those insights, really started to influence the script writing and the concept development, and where we ended up landing.
Yeah, it was the whole thing. We knew we wanted to take a different approach, but we didn't know what it was. And then when we spoke to him, Kanoa really opened up to us about this really, really cool story about his family. And his father and his mom, they moved from just north of Tokyo, Chiba, to Huntington Beach when Kanoa was 1 year old, and with the sole goal of making him a professional surfer. And 20 years later, he's a pro, and so he just has this real sense of sacrifice, both that his parents have done for him, and then this duty that he feels to his parents. And so we built the whole piece around that theme for him, the theme of sacrifice. And as we'll talk about later, that sort of began to take even more meaning as we started thinking about this in January, February, and then March, as COVID started happening and all these different things, it started picking up even more weight and being even more relevant. And then I think Cody can speak to a little bit more, but we took those truths, those conversations, and then that's what Cody really used to craft. The ask for him was to really to write a poem, and to draw from these conversations that we had with Kanoa and what he was talking about, to put words to it.
Yeah, Cody, why don't you tell us a little bit about this process of writing with insights? I know that you're also a poet and you write on your own, and it's a very different process. So I think it's also interesting for a lot of creatives that are both artists, but that might potentially that are interested in working together with brands, because I think that it does offer them a really unique platform to be able to exercise their creative muscles in a different capacity. So tell us a little bit more about the insights that were delivered to you and kind of your process of scripting for this spot.
Yeah, by the time I heard about it, it was a pretty fleshed out idea, and they had done a considerable amount of what Mike was talking about, where just trying to like get insights from the authentic source themselves. And so there were these like beautiful conversations that they had and they could draw upon. And I kind of relied on a little bit what I learned in law school with research, and I just really immersed myself in everything Kanoa, from like his social media to like all of his videos, anything I could do to hear him talk and like kind of like get to know like the type of person he was. I really wanted to make something that he would think was dope, basically, and that was really true to him. And the story was there, and I just added a little bit of like poetic device to it, a little repetition. A lot of the stuff was so beautifully said already by them in the transcripts that I received, that I like didn't even want to touch it. And so I didn't touch it as much as I could. And I like tried to just form his story into something that worked for this project, by doing a ton of research and immersing myself into like who the person was. And then on the editorial side, I would talk with Chris, and Chris was like the liaison with Mike and beats and everything, and they would give me feedback, and it was great. It was really helpful. It's unlike any creative writing on my own, where I have to like rely on myself for all of these sort of like different hats, but I could basically just take it wasn't personal at all. It was like, this is what we're looking for, this is what we're trying to go for. Like, this is too long. It was very practical, and it was awesome to be able to just like hone in on a project and execute under a timeline, in a group setting like that. And I don't know if anything else specifically, but that was the basic process for me.
Cool. I'm going to go off script a little bit. Mike, I'm super curious to know about the process of finding insights. You know, you've been in the industry for a long time. I think that, you know, every campaign varies, every story that you're trying to get at a certain truth or the core of the story, you know, that process varies. Every brand and their way of gaining insights varies. So just curious to know, like, what have been some of the ways that you have found most beneficial when it comes to, well, finding insights and kind of like excavating information to really tell these stories. And you know, I think for me it's really about this process of visual storytelling and what it means to tell stories that are connecting with other people's truths. So yeah, kind of your experience with.
And I think, you know, a lot of what Cody said, I think for us, it's our, you know, people on our roster, people that we're collaborating with, it's our responsibility to research who they are, where they're from, what they believe in. And I think now, especially with all the different social channels, and especially if they're, you know, an artist or an athlete or some kind of talent, you know, they tend to share, and there's a lot of information out there that you can gather. And I think that there's that, so it's a lot of research and development. But I also think, you know, it really goes back to these conversations, and I think those, knowing how to like authentically develop those relationships, it goes a long way.
Yeah. Cool.
It's really that. It's really simple. It's relationships and doing your research.
Yeah, your homework.
It's really the basics, you know.
Cool. Can you tell us a little bit, both, you know, Mike and Chris, jump in, kind of what was the timeline for making this campaign, and kind of, tell us all of the different steps. And also, Chris, I want you to kind of just dissect a little bit all of the key players that work on a campaign, just to kind of like map out all of.
Chris, I can give kind of like a brief overview, and then maybe you can jump in.
Yeah, let's do that.
Cool. So I think, you know, like usually it's about an 8 to 10 week timeline overall turnaround from concept to delivery. Sometimes it's quicker. A lot of the times it's quicker, especially with, you know, digital and social content, because it's a little more, not necessarily disposable, but quicker turnaround. But, you know, usually we'll spend about a week developing a brief. We'll spend another week or two concepting, and that's like going back and forth with Chris and Cody, you know, them coming back, we'll brief them, they'll come back and present, you know, maybe a spectrum of ideas of where we can take this. It could be something that's really visual and poetic, or something that's more of a classic interview, or something that's a bit more of a dialogue narrative. Like, so there's different ways to tell those stories, and we may go back and forth and get into it. And from there, once we approve it, we'll take those ideas and start to share them internally within the brand with our creative directors, the people who manage the business, who oversee different brand direction, and make sure that it aligns strategically with the business in those geos. And for in this case, in Asia, in Japan. And then from there, once the creative is aligned, then we have to manage the budget. We have to manage where the deliverables. So before we go into the production, we're understanding, okay, are we going to put this on TV, or are we going to put this online? And if so, are we going to put paid media online behind it? And what spaces online? Is it just going to be on YouTube? And then now it's like, okay, is this for Instagram? Is it for our channel, their sponsors' channels? Is it? And then you get into, is it for IG stories? Is it for IGTV? Is it, and then what's the version of this that's going to live on Twitter? What's the version of this that's going to live on Facebook? So that everything is platform specific, and we're not just taking a piece of content and just pasting it all these different spaces. So I think for that, it's just for an idea, we try to articulate that idea for different media formats. And I think we've evolved and grew into that, and a lot of the brands have, and just being more aware of the different spaces and how people consume and behave in different spaces. So after we shoot it, so we'll go into pre-production. We'll start to develop with Chris, and then we'll end up going into production. We'll shoot, and then from there it's post-production, where we'll spend about a week in editorial, and then we'll go back and forth with Chris and Cody, and then we'll go back and forth with Kanoa and his team, and then we'll ultimately end up on an edit that we're all happy with. And from there, we'll start to do music composition. We'll start to get into color correction. We'll start to get into visual effects. And then we have probably about, 3 to 5 days of the delivery process, where what Chris showed you, there might be 100 different deliverables for IG stories, IGTV, it's just all these different formats that we have to deliver. It might be a 60-second version, a 30-second version, a 15. And the list goes on and on, especially if it's living in different countries. There's translation. So it's just like a whole workflow that's integrated into the whole process. And I think that happens kind of 8 to 10 weeks.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
But that's it. We've been known to turn it around in 3 weeks if you have to. You just don't sleep.
Yeah.
Chris, do you want to maybe touch upon, like, on the other side, on the production side, who are all the players that are comprising these production teams? And
yeah, so I mean, the same. Sorry, Zandie. So the same concept that we take with our approach to the talent, we take that with who our internal partners are, our creative resources and our production partners. So in this case, GBA being based in Tokyo, and this whole campaign is really telling Japanese stories. So we work closely we identified up and coming Japanese directors for this one to help us tell that story. We asked them we kind of take what we've showed you guys. We take these core ideas to directors and have them put treatments together. And then they submit the treatments, and then we work with Mike and his team to decide on which filmmaker and production team can execute, both creatively what we want, and to a point that Mike said, it's always this dance with the budget and just the execution, production details of it. So sort of whatever is the best marriage of those aspects. And again,
it's also a balance of, like, you guys watch the film, I think you start to fall in love with the story, and you're not necessarily seeing like product shot. Like, this is like a Beats commercial. It's like you really, and it's a matter, that's what we're developing with Chris and Cody, is finding that balance. Okay, like, it can't just be, we have to kind of do both without it being too overt and too heavy. heavy-handed in finding that right balance of art and commerce.
Yeah, and I think that's, that was a conversation that we had, Mike, going into this, is like how far can we push that to the art side? And they really wanted us to feel like we could be as artistic as we wanted with this. And so that's, just speaking to this one in particular, there were obviously certain production challenges, like the shooting the underwater scene with Kanoa. We kind of had to, I can get really granular with the production details, and maybe anyone who wants to hear those details can hit me up afterwards. But there's all sorts of little things that go into this stuff that, maybe it's just that shot was only a couple seconds long, but we spent a lot of time mapping this out, and then, carrying it into post-production is a whole different side of it. And then basically right when we hit post-production was when COVID started getting really serious in the States. So that added some hurdles, but in a way it was actually just the way that we already have been working. A lot of people are really able to adapt really quickly, and that's kind of the name of the industry, and that's actually how GBA was built, on this sort of concept of being able to be more nimble. So we really didn't have to change too much of the workflow because of COVID, because everyone was either able to work from home, really comfortable working remotely. We had music partners, post-production partners, everyone sort of working in their own lanes remotely to make it really come to life, and then sort of maybe tweaking a couple things with the narrative. And that was basically how it worked.
Yeah, cool. Chris, I'm glad that you touched upon that, because I do know that, COVID has really changed the nature of work for a lot of people. Luckily for some productions, it hasn't. It has a little bit, but, Chris, Cody, and I all graduated right around the 2008 financial crisis, and it was a really kind of seminal time in what was happening to the labor force in America, very not dissimilar to what's happening right now. I think that, this is a multi-part question, and I know that we're running out of time already, and there's so many questions that I want to ask you guys, but just kind of curious to know how, what kind of advice you might have for students that are interested in breaking into the industry right now, in part because of the nature of work right now and working from home and being able to build those relationships. Michael, I know you're really talking about how relationships are at the kind of the key of telling good stories, of being a good creative, but then also finding work. So if you have any advice for students. And then the second part is also kind of talking a little bit about this idea of the hyphenated roles that you play as a creative. I think that at the beginning I said I'm a curator and cultural strategist, which I am, and really have worked as a curator, but I'm also a writer and a photographer and a publisher and an educator. So, we're living in this time of slasher culture, if you will. And so kind of trying to understand who are some of your mentors, and Michael, also feel free to chime in, along the way that helped you guys find your path and pivot and to kind of find new applications for the different skills and knowledge that you have, or and apply them to different contexts depending on what kind of work is actually available due to the economic situation.
I think right now is an interesting time, but I also think it's a great time for creativity. I think it's the right time for creative entrepreneurship. And you can really start to showcase what you're capable of. I think that your guys' generation that's in college and in school right now, you guys have a lot of tools and resources at your fingertips. And I think it's a matter of putting that to use and showing what you can make on your own is what's going to allow you to have those conversations when they come, because those conversations are going to happen. I think you guys are one of the more insightful generations, and all the brands right now are looking to you guys for insights. And I think you guys have to do everything you can to be prepared for those conversations, because they will happen. And I think by showing a body of work and what whether it's photography or if you're shooting or if you're a conceptual thinker, having your portfolios ready and because it can happen next week, and it will happen, and making sure that that body of work is there. And I think everybody now is also more forgiving because we're all working in this climate, so we know everybody's aware of what parameters you might have. But if you can say, hey, I kind of just made this in my backyard, or hey, when I was at home, I was working, I made this little film, or this is the type of photography I was doing during the quarantine, and these are the stories that I wanted to tell, and here was the thinking behind it. And I think people are looking for conceptual thinkers as well as executors. So if you can show the thought into the things that you're making and be able to articulate it in a way, that's going to go far, especially if you're a young, bright, talented, creative person. And then as far as the hyphenated thing you touched on, Zandie, and Chris knows this, I'm a big supporter of that, a big believer in that. I think that that's what makes you guys valuable. I think before, in a lot of ways, it was, I am the best person at finance, and I am successful at finance, and this is what I do. And now it's just like, not only do I do finance, but I play the bass, I am a DJ, I make beats, I toy around with animation, I definitely do photography, and and I'm a conceptual thinker, I'm a writer, I write poetry, and I have a brand that I make for animals. You know what I mean? So it's like you having all these different things allows you to have different perspectives from different angles. And I think that's what makes you guys special in a room. So I think what used to be jack of all trades, master of none is now like you having multiple perspectives. And so like having multiple insights because you are all these different things. Makes you more valuable to a team, makes you more valuable to a brand, because brands are trying to create things in different spaces. It's not just one isolated thing before. So I think for me, at least, that's what I'm looking for when I'm working with young creative people, is like all these different disciplines, and so that we can get all those different insights and articulations of those ideas. Yeah, I hope that helped, that answered.
Yeah, no, that's great. I definitely want to pick that apart actually. But before I do that, I don't know if Chris or Cody, you guys had anything to say.
I would just completely echo what Mike said. As far as my own path is concerned, even like I studied cultural anthropology at Duke, which maybe I think actually helps just in a general thinking sense and how you approach things, but it was not like a specialization at all. And I bounce around. I love making music, and then when I got into content production, I found a lot of similar qualities to that and music production, which I thought was cool. And honestly, like it was really just, in that case, like Mike gave me a shot 10 years ago, and just kind of believed in just, I think maybe just can recognize someone that can hustle and get stuff done. Is maybe like the core quality. And so I think there's an importance there, maybe it's just a little separate of a conversation, but just the ability to be able to have mentors is really important, and colleagues that can support you, and because everyone is doing different stuff. So the more you can surround yourself with really great people, I think the greater chance you have of finding maybe your path might vary a little bit, but it might lead in special directions you didn't even expect,
Yeah, I'd have to second that. And I'd also say that mentors can't come in all different forms. They're not necessarily these older, wiser people that have years and years of experience. But they could be someone that's a year older than you. They could even be someone that's younger than you. And actually what I found is the best mentorship relationships that I have is not necessarily this one person, this like learned individual that knows everything about something and is going to tell you what to do, but really is actually someone that you're there's like a kind of bilateral exchange of information. You're learning from them just as much as they're learning from you. Yeah. Um, so I wanted to kind of shift into, we get about 10 minutes left, into a few questions that are coming in from some students. This is something I wanted to talk with you guys about, so I'm glad it's being asked. But you know, I think that tech and media companies have really been in the headlines for a lot of their equity practices recently, and just curious, student asked, in navigating different cultures and customs, how do you guys find the line between appreciation and appropriation, and why do you think it's important to do so? So I'll let any of you guys answer that.
I think you have to appreciate all the different cultures, for sure. I think if as a brand that as a global brand, I think you have to not only appreciate the cultures, but you also have to understand the different cultures, and then find that balance of what you believe in as a brand and what's important for those different cultures, and then having that conversation about how it's respectful to both, and not just going there and imposing our own thoughts and what we believe and what we want from a business and from a strategy point of view. I think you got to be way more aware of that. I think there's a lot of cultural nuances that you have to be respectful to, and that there's a lot of things that we may not understand. And again, it goes back to insights. It goes back to relationships with people that we work with and collaborate within those markets. But then we also have ambassadors in each of those markets that give us those insights, and that's what gives us that awareness. So we're never just going into a country and imposing our brand. It's always very strategic and hyper aware.
Cody or Chris, do you guys have anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, I think as far as in the way we work, it's similar. You know, the thinking, if we're developing an idea, it's about who we are collaborating with and being really responsible about being inclusive and doing things with purpose. So and being, you know, really thoughtful with the projects that we're working on, both like, you know, what the output is, but also internally who the players are that are making it. And we want it to be authentic to the culture that we're, you know, sort of tapping into, or the voices that we're expressing.
That's a global thing too. I mean, it might not be different countries. It's also for different cultures domestically.
Yeah.
For us, you know, we're very intentional. You know, if we're working with Black artists or Black athletes, it's our intention to collaborate with Black photographers and Black directors and everybody else behind the scenes, all the way down to the colorist and in post-production. And I think that for us is we're hyper intentional about that.
Yeah, cool. Curious to know, let's see. This one's specific to Duke, but maybe I'll make it more general. So Michael, you can also answer. What kind of resources did you find were beneficial to where you are now that you engaged in when you were in college? And or were there resources that, or things that you wish you had done while you were an undergraduate that you think could have benefited you in the work that you guys do now?
I think internships go a long way. Anything and everything to you. Internships are more important for you to find out what you don't want to do, in my opinion. And really get into a place or a company and just start to be observed, like, okay, and really start to be observant and paying attention to how the space and the environment behaves and moves. And then you can start to see, okay, that's what a marketing person does. Okay, that's what they do in the studio. okay, that's what the music team does, that's what the producers and that's what the art directors do, and start to identify different spaces so that when you get back to school, you start to have a better understanding of what you do want to do. And I think, for creators, I think, you have to just constantly create in different formats and never let them put you in a hole. If you're a musician, you should be playing with content. If you are a photographer, you should be trying to make music. And I think the cross-pollination of different formats is where we're headed. More of those intersections you can create, the more valuable you are to a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that actually Alyssa just sent me a question asking how you guys think content creators can stay innovative and relevant with so much pressure, especially because the social media landscape is changing so quickly and there are so many stories to excavate and there are so many ways of expressing and telling those stories. So I do think that cross-disciplinary approach to storytelling, the transmedia approach, if you will, is definitely starting to pick up. And yeah, curious to know if you, Chris or Cody, have any insights into that as well.
Into how to stay innovative in social
Yeah,
media?
how to stay innovative with all of the pressure and going about finding interesting subjects with compelling stories and or ways of telling those compelling stories in ways that haven't already been told before.
I think it's Cody, I'll let you comment on that too, but I think it's a balance of knowing, of doing your, of knowing what's out there and really being aware of how other people are creating, and seeing sort of what mediums people are using, but also, keeping a little bit of your own heart and vision separate from that, and allowing yourself the space to try something that maybe isn't even in that realm of sort of these modes that we use, and maybe you'll find something in that way without having to force it,
Totally. Cody, do you have anything?
Yeah, what was the question again?
Just how do you think you can remain innovative in the ways that you're telling stories, but also in the types of stories that you're telling?
Well, I constantly read or try to take in as much of compelling media as I can, and usually I'll find someone that I know is a really good, trustworthy voice that I can just feel in my heart, and then that person will be like, and I vouch for this person, and they'll say that. I'm like, oh, I'll read a little bit of that too, and I read that, and they say, oh, these 5 people, those are the guys and girls that I'm about, and then you go into that, and there's just this light that you follow, and as long as I stay true to that, whatever comes out is usually pretty solid.
And just to jump off that too, maybe it's also if you're a digital content creator, read more long form literature, and be in these different mediums. You can find inspiration from different platforms, different creative expressions that you can apply to your your field.
Yeah, and I'll also say it's a lot of the stuff is really new, that it's all changing, but a lot of the answers are already there, and been there for thousands of years. And so I guess just going back to the primary sources too, and reading the people that have been thinking about this stuff for years and years and years on a more philosophical level helps me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that it was Ralph Waldo Emerson always talks about the 3 components of education, which were to study nature, and books, which was really not so much to be this scholar of this really kind of impenetrable knowledge, but really to use books as a source of inspiration, and that activates the soul and the way of the kind of bits of that make us more human, the creative side of our existence. So really quickly, speaking on media, I'm going to close this out by asking all 3 of our amazing panelists 2 things. Can you guys give me a book, a film, a piece of music, an album, some sort of media that has really been inspiring you recently? And then also 1 piece of advice. So you guys do that, and then I'm gonna also contribute. So Michael, maybe we'll start with you.
Um, so many.
I know.
Let's see. Um, oh, the series that I've been watching is, have you guys seen I May Destroy You on HBO?
Is it good?
I think it's great. I
Yeah.
think the writing is good. The acting is great. If you haven't seen it, you guys should check that out. It's on HBO. So I've been watching that. Uh, look, hold on. I'm gonna grab my book.
From a book, for me, I would say A Dream Come True by the author Anetti, which is a series of short stories, which, Cody, I sent you a copy of that. But I've been reading this book of short stories that I found really interesting. I like the short form format of that too.
Inspiration media wise. Yeah, a lot of stuff like Mike said. I think like right now I'm like really inspired by like everything's so heavy. So like whenever I see something that just seems like light and like and but real at the same time, like not fake, I'm like so happy about it. And the most recent Lil Uzi Vert album just like makes me like dance every time I hear it, and it just makes me like happy. So it's like super inspirational from a writing standpoint because I like approach all these heavy concepts and I'm not saying he's saying a whole lot of deep stuff, but like it's like it just like inspires me to be like more lighthearted and like and uplifting. And yeah, just to dance more. And was there a quote call or
Piece of
advice? Oh, okay, meditate.
Yes. Cool. Okay, so my piece of media is Gordon Parks did a article for Time back in 1957 about crime in America and about incarceration. And he published like 8 images in the article. And there was a whole series that he did that actually was just republished with Steitel, the German photo book publisher. And it's an incredible book, and it's really, for me, it was really inspiring and interesting to kind of, and a great reminder to think about how there are so many important photographers of color that were working throughout the 20th century, and who, to a certain extent, if you were to rewrite history through the lens of Black photographers or people of color photographers, we would have a whole nother understanding of what is visual culture today and our identities that are linked to this visual history. And I look at some of his work and I think of like, David Lynch's films or Tarantino's films, and I'm like, but this, way predates all of these filmmakers. So I think it's really interesting to kind of excavate who else was making art and was telling stories, but who for a long time were kind of written out of history. So to do that homework as well. My piece of advice is, I know we were talking a lot about being hyphenated, having these identities that are, different modes of kind of expressing the work and the research that we do. But I also would say find something that you're really obsessed with, and even if it's super niche, and like go towards it and kind of just become an expert in that topic, whether it's like algae, like bioluminescent algae, or some sort of community-based architectural practices, or whatever it might be. But remember that your various modes of expression as a creative are all these different vehicles and channels for you to like express this like passion and this interest. So whether you're writing about it or making music about it or also making films about it, like that's cool, and you should do all of that and work in a cross-disciplinary manner. But like find something that you're really obsessed with and like nerd out, and like it's cool to be a nerd.
True. Very true.
Cool. So on that note, I just wanted to also say that we're all here because we really encourage all of you guys to tell your own stories, and don't shy away from them. Like, the best stories actually start from yourself. They're in your families. They're maybe you yourself has a really interesting, unique story. Maybe it's your parents, maybe it's your grandparents. So it's kind of just having those conversations with the people that are closest to you. Maybe it's your neighbor. Yeah, and we're all here because we support you. So if you guys have more questions, feel free to reach out. Amy's gonna send around an email with a link to the spot that we showed earlier tonight in case you guys want to watch it again, and with our contact information. So just wanted to say thank you again for joining us. A special, super warm thank you to Michael and Chris and Cody for taking time out of your busy schedules to hop on with us today. And of course, very many thanks to Amy and Kevin for putting this together. Just want to let you guys know that RSVPs for the next episodes featuring the cast and crew of the indie film Miss Juneteenth, as well as Dukey's Behind the Band Delta Ray, are online, so sign up for those and feel free to get online to watch all 13 episodes from season 1. So thanks again, everyone. Be well, be healthy, and good night.